6 in the morning on what started as an ordinary Tuesday. The sun's coming up over the city, traffic's building on the expressway, and I've got my coffee here like always, but I need to talk to you about something that came across the wire about 20 minutes ago. Reports out of Newark Medical Center, St. Vincent's, and apparently 3 other hospitals in the metro area about unusual admissions overnight. We're talking about patients presenting with what doctors are initially calling severe neurological symptoms following what appeared to be animal bites or human altercations. Now, before anyone panics, the health department released a statement at 5:45 saying they're monitoring the situation and there's no immediate cause for public alarm. But here's what's strange. I've been doing this job for 17 years and I've never seen a coordinated statement go out this early about isolated hospital cases. My producer, Sarah, just handed me another update. Make that 6 hospitals now. 6 hospitals across 3 counties reporting similar cases within a 12-hour window. The symptoms they're describing include extreme agitation, hypersensitivity to light and sound, difficulty swallowing, and in some cases violent behavior requiring physical restraint. The CDC was contacted around 4 this morning, and they've dispatched a team that should arrive at Newark Medical sometime before noon. State health officials are calling it a possible rabies variant, but they're being very careful with their language. Possible variant, not confirmed. I want to read you exactly what the statement says. Quote, out of an abundance of caution, residents who may have been bitten or scratched by unfamiliar animals or individuals exhibiting erratic behavior in the past 72 hours should seek immediate medical evaluation. The disease progression appears rapid in observed cases and early intervention is critical, end quote.
Rapid progression.
That's the part that has emergency room physicians concerned. Traditional rabies takes days, sometimes weeks to manifest after exposure. These patients are showing severe symptoms within hours. One doctor I spoke with off the record about 30 minutes ago said he's never seen anything like it in his career. Said one patient came in at 11 last night after being bitten by someone at a subway station, and by 3 in the morning was completely unresponsive to standard rabies protocols. The morning news channels are starting to pick this up now. I'm watching The Crawl on Channel 7, and they're reporting it as a potential rabies outbreak, advising people to avoid stray animals and report aggressive behavior. But that feels incomplete somehow. The incidents being reported aren't just animal attacks. There are multiple cases of person-to-person transmission, if that's even the right word for it. Let me be clear about what we know and what we don't know. We know that hospitals are seeing an uptick in patients with neurological symptoms. We know the health department is taking it seriously enough to involve the CDC. We know they're telling people to seek treatment if exposed. What we don't know is the exact nature of this pathogen, how it's spreading so quickly, or how many people might be affected. Traffic report just came in, and there's unusual congestion near St. Vincent's Hospital. Not an accident, just volume. People heading to emergency rooms, presumably. The parking situation at Newark Medical is apparently a disaster right now, with their ER at capacity and ambulances being diverted to other facilities. I'm getting texts from listeners already, someone asking if they should keep their kids home from school today. Honestly, I don't have that answer for you. The official guidance right now is to continue normal activities while remaining vigilant. Watch for anyone acting strangely, avoid physical contact with people showing signs of illness, and report concerns to authorities. But here's what's bothering me. I've covered disease outbreaks before, H1N1, Ebola scares, COVID. There's usually a rhythm to how information comes out. Slow at first, then building as data accumulates. This feels different. This feels like authorities already know more than they're saying, and they're trying to figure out how to communicate it without causing panic. My news director just walked into the studio, which never happens during the morning show. He's got his phone out showing me something. Hold on. Okay, I need to share this with you because it's going to be on the news in the next few minutes anyway. There's been an incident at the Newark Medical Center emergency room. Details are still emerging, but apparently one of the patients admitted overnight became violent, attacked staff members and other patients before security could intervene. 3 hospital employees are being treated for bites and lacerations. The patient in question had to be fully sedated and is now in isolation. Now, we're going to get more information on this as the morning goes on, but I want everyone to stay calm. Hospitals have protocols for managing violent patients. This is being handled by professionals. What concerns me is the pattern. Multiple hospitals, similar symptoms, rapid onset, aggressive behavior. The health department is scheduled to give a press conference at 9 this morning, and I'll be covering that live. The sun's fully up now, and from where I'm sitting on the 8th floor, the city looks normal. I can see the morning commute, buses running their routes, delivery trucks making their rounds, life continuing as it always does. But there's this undercurrent of uncertainty now, this feeling that maybe today isn't going to unfold like we expected. I'm looking at social media, and it's starting to blow up. People posting about aggressive individuals they encountered yesterday, wondering if it's connected. Someone saw a man attacking a woman near Penn Station last night. Another person reporting their neighbor acting erratically and banging on doors at 3 in the morning. Could be unrelated, could be drugs, mental health crises, completely separate incidents, or could be we're seeing the early edges of something larger. The thing about living in a city of 8 million people is that strange things happen constantly. Violence, erratic behavior, it's part of the urban landscape. So when does it cross from normal city chaos to something systematic? When do we recognize a pattern? I think that's what health officials are trying to figure out right now in real time. Another update coming through. Emergency services are reporting higher than normal. Call volumes overnight, not catastrophic, but elevated. Mostly calls about disturbed individuals, domestic disturbances, and requests for medical assistance involving aggressive patients. The police department says they're monitoring the situation but haven't declared any kind of emergency. I want to talk about rabies for a minute because I think people need to understand what we might be dealing with. Classic rabies has been around forever. It's a virus that attacks the central nervous system, transmitted through saliva, usually from animal bites. Once symptoms appear, it's almost always fatal, almost being the key word, because there have been a handful of survivors in medical history, but we're talking single digits globally. The reason rabies is so terrifying is what it does to the brain. The virus causes inflammation, leads to confusion, agitation, hallucinations, hydrophobia, which is fear of water, and eventually paralysis and death. The aggressive behavior people associate with rabid animals comes from the way the virus hijacks the nervous system, essentially programming the host to bite and spread the infection before dying. But here's the thing, rabies doesn't work this fast. The incubation period is typically 1 to 3 months, sometimes longer. These cases are showing symptoms in hours, so either we're dealing with a mutation that's dramatically accelerated the timeline, or this is something else entirely that just resembles rabies. I have a virologist from Columbia University on the line, Dr. Elizabeth Chen. Dr. Chen, thank you for calling in this morning. She's explaining that viruses mutate constantly, and RNA viruses like rabies are particularly prone to genetic changes. A mutation that speeds up replication and symptom onset isn't outside the realm of possibility, especially if the virus has jumped between species recently or encountered some environmental pressure that's selected for faster acting strains. What she's saying is concerning, though. She says if this is indeed a rabies variant with accelerated onset, it completely changes the treatment window. The standard post-exposure prophylaxis might not be effective if the virus reaches the central nervous system before antibodies can be produced. She's recommending that anyone exposed should seek treatment immediately, not wait to see if symptoms develop. With traditional rabies, you have time. With this, you might not. And Dr. Chen just said something else. She said the medical community has been warning about this possibility for years. Rabies is endemic in wildlife populations around the world, and with climate change pushing species into new territories, with urban sprawl bringing humans into closer contact with wildlife, the conditions for a spillover event have been building. Add in international travel, dense population centers, and you have the perfect setup for rapid transmission if a more virulent strain emerges. I asked her if she thinks that's what we're seeing, and she won't commit to it. Says she needs to see data, needs to know what the CDC finds, but her tone tells me she's worried. She's worried in that specific way. Scientists get when theoretical models start matching reality. It's 6:45 now, and I'm switching over to the traffic report, but I'll keep monitoring the health situation. Drive safe out there, and please, if you or anyone you know had contact with someone acting aggressively or was bitten in the last few days, go to a hospital. Don't wait. The traffic's getting worse, actually, not just near hospitals now, but on major routes heading out of the city. Could be normal rush hour building early, or could be people making decisions to leave before this gets worse. Hard to tell. The George Washington Bridge has delays, Lincoln Tunnel is backed up, and there's a cluster of slowdowns on the expressway that doesn't match the normal pattern. I'm watching the news feeds from other cities now. Boston reporting similar cases. Philadelphia has confirmed admissions matching the symptom profile. There's something developing in Baltimore. This isn't isolated to our metro area anymore. This is regional at minimum, possibly wider than that. The phones are lighting up. I'm not taking calls on air yet because I don't want to spread misinformation or panic, but my producer is logging them. People want to know if they should go to work, whether schools are closing, if public transportation is safe. I don't have good answers because the official guidance is still maintain normal routines while being cautious. But I'm thinking about my own family. My wife works downtown. My daughter's in 6th grade at PS 1118. Should I call them, tell them to come home? Based on what exactly? A few dozen cases across multiple hospitals and a vague warning from health officials? Or do I trust that the system will respond appropriately, that we'll get clear guidance when needed? This is the calculus everyone's doing right now. Risk assessment in real time with incomplete information. Do you upend your life based on possibilities, or do you wait for confirmation and potentially lose the opportunity to act? The health department just moved up their press conference to 8 instead of 9. That tells me something. When authorities accelerate their communication timeline, it usually means the situation is evolving faster than anticipated. They want to get ahead of it, provide guidance before things deteriorate further. I'm looking at case numbers now, and they've updated again. 73 confirmed cases across the metro area as of 6:30 this morning. 73 people in hospitals with this condition, and those are just the ones sick enough to seek emergency treatment. How many people are walking around with early symptoms not yet severe enough to warrant a hospital visit? How many were exposed but haven't developed symptoms yet? If this thing has even a modest transmission rate and symptoms develop within hours, the math gets ugly fast. Exponential growth is hard for human brains to grasp intuitively. We think linearly. One case becomes 2, becomes 4. But exponential means 1 becomes 2, becomes 4, becomes 8, becomes 16, becomes 32. And suddenly you're at numbers that overwhelm healthcare capacity. I don't want to catastrophize. Maybe this is containable. Maybe the CDC arrives with treatment protocols that work. Maybe this is a limited outbreak that gets managed before it spreads further. But I also think people deserve honest assessment of what we're facing. And right now we're facing a lot of unknowns with a pathogen that seems to act faster than anything we've dealt with before. Someone just sent me a video from overnight. I'm watching it now, and I need to decide whether to describe it on air. It shows an individual in what looks like a parking garage, movements erratic, attacking someone, getting into a car. The person filming is far enough away that details aren't clear, but the aggression is obvious, unprovoked, savage, sustained even after the victim is down. I'm not going to share that video publicly because it serves no purpose except to frighten people, but it does confirm what we're hearing in reports. Whatever this condition is, it fundamentally changes behavior. The infected, if that's the right term, become violent in a way that doesn't seem directed by conscious thought. It's more like, and I hate to use this word, more like predatory. The news is calling it a rabies variant, but I wonder if that's the complete picture. Rabies causes aggression. Yes, but what we're seeing described seems more focused, more driven. I spoke with an ER nurse off the record a few minutes ago, and she said the patients aren't just agitated. They're fixated on other people trying to bite specifically, even when restrained. Like the virus is driving them toward transmission behaviors. Evolution doesn't care about the host. A virus that kills its carrier is fine as long as it spreads first. A mutation that makes hosts more aggressive, more likely to bite and transmit before succumbing. That's evolutionarily advantageous for the pathogen. We might be seeing natural selection in action, a virus optimizing itself for human transmission. It's 7 now, and the sun's been up for over an hour, but the city has this different quality to it this morning. I keep looking out the window, expecting to see something obviously wrong, some visual confirmation of the crisis, but it's just Tuesday morning. Coffee shops opening, people walking dogs, taxis cruising for fares. The disconnect between normalcy and emergency is jarring. The mayor's office just announced they're joining the health department press conference at 8. The mayor doesn't show up to routine health briefings. This is crisis management now. They're going to try to project calm and control while explaining a situation that's neither calm nor controlled. I'm reading through the CDC guidelines for rabies exposure, and the standard treatment is post-exposure prophylaxis, which involves a series of rabies vaccine shots and immune globulin. It's effective if administered before symptoms appear, but once symptoms start, survival rate drops to nearly zero. Given how fast this variant is progressing, the window for effective treatment might be just hours. That's terrifying. That means people who were exposed yesterday might already be past the point of saving. More cases are being reported. I'm watching the numbers tick up on the health department's dashboard, which they apparently set up overnight. 89 cases now, 92, 96. The count is updating faster than I can read it. This is widespread. This is not a handful of isolated incidents anymore. The hospitals are coordinating through the city's emergency management system now. They're setting up dedicated isolation wards for symptomatic patients and trying to establish protocols for treatment. But from what I'm hearing, treatment isn't working. The standard rabies vaccine isn't stopping progression. Antiviral medications aren't having an effect. Patients are deteriorating despite intervention. There's a report coming in from Jersey City about an incident at a school. Early morning staff member exhibited symptoms, became aggressive. School is closed, building is quarantined, and everyone present is being evaluated. That's going to trigger school closures across the region. Parents are going to pull their kids even without official directives. My producer is telling me the station's general manager wants to implement emergency broadcasting protocols. That means we'd switch to continuous coverage, cancel regular programming, and focus entirely on this situation. I think that's the right call. People need information more than they need music or regular shows right now. The phone system is overwhelmed. We can't keep up with incoming calls. People are scared and looking for answers, and I'm just one person in a radio studio trying to make sense of information as it comes in. I wish I had more definitive guidance to offer. I wish authorities were being more transparent about the severity of this. Actually, let me revise that. Maybe authorities are being exactly as transparent as they can be, given what they know. It's possible they're just as confused and frightened as the rest of us trying to manage a crisis they don't fully understand yet. The CDC team hasn't even arrived. We're operating on preliminary assessments from local hospitals and health departments who've never seen anything like this before. And keep thinking about pandemic preparedness plans. After COVID, every city updated their protocols, stockpiled equipment, trained personnel for rapid response. But those plans assume certain parameters. They assume time to develop treatments, ability to trace contacts, capacity to isolate and quarantine. If this thing spreads through bites and saliva and incubates in hours, traditional containment strategies might not work fast enough.
It's 7:20 and I'm seeing reports of panic buying starting. Supermarkets opening to crowds, people stocking up on food and water. Again, is this justified or premature? I don't know. I keep coming back to that. I don't know. And I think that's the honest answer for almost every question right now.
The news channels are showing footage from hospitals, crowds outside emergency rooms, ambulances lined up, security trying to manage the flow of people. One hospital apparently ran out of rabies vaccine and is waiting for emergency shipments from the state stockpile. Another has closed their ER to new patients except critical cases because they're at capacity.
Think about that.
Major hospitals closing their emergency rooms on a Tuesday morning. That doesn't happen unless the system is already breaking down. We're not even 12 hours into this being a recognized public health event, and we're already seeing healthcare infrastructure strain. The military is being mobilized. National Guard units are being activated for possible deployment to support civilian authorities. That's coming from the governor's office, which also announced they're declaring a state of emergency, effective immediately. A state of emergency gives the government broader powers to control movement, allocate resources, and enforce quarantines if needed.
Quarantines?
That word is entering the conversation now. If this can't be treated and it spreads rapidly, the only option is to isolate the infected and limit contact between people. But quarantine on what scale? Buildings, neighborhoods, the entire city? And how do you enforce that in a metro area of 8 million people? I'm trying to imagine the logistics of quarantine in an urban environment like this. You'd need checkpoints, barriers, personnel to manage them. You'd need to maintain supply lines for food, medicine, utilities. You'd need communication systems to coordinate it all. Even with military support, it would be an enormous undertaking, and it would only work if people complied.
Will people comply? That's the question, isn't it?
When authorities say stay in your homes, don't leave the quarantine zone, trust us to handle this, will people listen? Or will they make their own risk assessments and try to flee, potentially spreading the infection to unaffected areas? I would want to leave, if I'm being honest. If someone told me my neighborhood was quarantined and there was a contagious, deadly disease spreading, my instinct would be to get my family and go, get out before the net closes. And I think most people would feel the same way, which means enforcing quarantine would require force, police, military, barriers, essentially martial law. We're not there yet. I need to emphasize that. Right now, it's just a state of emergency declaration, which is precautionary. The governor is giving herself authority to act if needed, but that doesn't mean all those measures will be implemented. Still, the fact that it's on the table tells you how seriously officials are taking this. The press conference is in 30 minutes, and I'm expecting them to announce major actions. School closures, probably. Restrictions on public gatherings, maybe shelter-in-place orders for affected areas. They need to slow transmission while the CDC figures out what we're dealing with and how to treat it. And getting messages from colleagues at other stations, everyone's shifting to emergency coverage, radio, TV, online outlets, all switching to continuous monitoring of this situation. The media ecosystem recognizing this is the story, the only story that matters right now. Someone just asked a good question via text. They want to know if animals are affected. The initial assumption was this jumped from animals to humans, but are domestic pets at risk? Are wildlife populations vectors for ongoing transmission? I don't have that information, and I haven't seen it addressed in official statements, added to the list of unknowns. If animals are carriers, that complicates everything. You can quarantine people, but you can't quarantine every dog, cat, squirrel, and rat in the city. You'd have a constant reservoir of infection that could keep sparking new cases, even if you controlled human-to-human transmission. I'm spiraling a bit here, thinking through worst-case scenarios. Let me refocus on facts. What we know for certain: cases of a rabies-like illness are being reported across multiple cities in the Northeast. Symptoms include neurological distress and violent behavior. Onset is rapid. Treatment is ineffective so far. Authorities are responding with emergency measures. That's what we know. Everything else is speculation, and I need to be careful not to amplify fear beyond what's justified by the evidence. People are already scared. My job is to inform, not to panic them further. But I'm scared too. I think I need to say that I'm sitting here in this studio doing my job, providing information to listeners, and I'm frightened, not just for myself, but for everyone. For the nurses and doctors dealing with violent patients, for the families of people already infected, for the society we've built that might not be resilient enough to handle something like this. Cities are fragile systems. They work because of countless interdependencies: power grids, water treatment, food distribution, waste management, communication networks. All of it relies on people showing up to work, on supply chains functioning, on infrastructure maintained by skilled workers. If enough people get sick, or if enough people decide to flee, the whole thing could collapse. I don't think we're at that point. I think we're still in the early stages where responses are possible and catastrophe isn't inevitable, but I can see the path from here to there, and it's shorter than I'd like to admit.
It's 7:40 now, 20 minutes until the press conference. I'm going to take a quick break, check in with my family, make sure they're aware of what's happening, and have a plan. If things deteriorate, stay with 104.7 FM. We'll be right back with continuous coverage of this developing situation. I'm back. Spoke with my wife, and she's already decided to keep our daughter home from school today. Smart decision. Even without official closures, erring on the side of caution makes sense. She asked if she should leave the city, head to her parents' place upstate. I told her to wait for the press conference, see what authorities recommend, but I'm wondering if that's the right advice. What if by the time we get clear guidance, it's too late to leave safely? The traffic cameras are showing heavy outbound flow now, definitely more than normal rush hour volume. People are making their own decisions, voting with their vehicles. The question is whether they're overreacting or correctly reading the situation ahead of official acknowledgement.
I'm watching the news feed, and there's a reporter outside Newark Medical Center trying to interview people. One man saying his brother was admitted overnight and died 2 hours ago, died from exposure to progression to death in less than 12 hours. The reporter is asking if he was given treatment, and the man is saying yes, they tried everything, but nothing worked. He's crying on camera saying his brother bit a nurse before dying, and now she's showing symptoms too.
This is the nightmare scenario. Healthcare workers getting infected while trying to treat patients. that accelerates the collapse of medical capacity. Doctors and nurses can't work if they're sick or dead. And if they start refusing to treat patients out of fear for their own safety, the system fails. There has to be protective equipment, protocols to minimize exposure risk for medical staff, but in the chaos of emergency rooms overwhelmed with violent patients, protocols break down, someone gets bitten, blood makes contact with a mucous membrane, and the infection spreads. The case count is at 164, just in this metro area, and that's only confirmed cases at hospitals. The real number of infected is certainly higher. Some people won't seek treatment until symptoms are severe. Others might not have access to health care. Others might be dead before anyone knows they were sick. I'm trying to think about what success looks like here. Best case scenario, the CDC identifies an effective treatment. We distribute it widely. We contain the outbreak to current geographic boundaries, and life returns to normal in a few weeks. But that requires everything going right. Discovery of treatment, rapid production, efficient distribution, public cooperation. How often does everything go right during a crisis? More likely this gets worse before it gets better. More cases, more deaths, more restrictions on daily life, quarantines that last weeks or months, economic disruption, social breakdown. And that's if we manage to eventually contain it. If we don't, if this thing keeps spreading unchecked, I don't know what the end game is. The press conference is starting. I'm going to listen and relay the key points. The mayor is speaking first, flanked by the health commissioner and someone from emergency management. She's trying to project calm, talking about the city's resilience and experience handling crises. Now she's getting to specifics. All public schools closed effective immediately. All city-run facilities closed. Public gatherings of more than 10 people prohibited. Residents advised to stay home unless absolutely necessary. That's a significant escalation, essentially shutting down the city's public functions and asking 8 million people to shelter in place. The mayor is saying this is temporary, just a slow transmission, while health authorities work on treatment options. She's emphasizing that utilities will continue, essential services will be maintained, food supply is secure. The health commissioner is speaking now. She's confirming what we've been reporting, a novel pathogen, likely a rabies variant, highly contagious through bodily fluids, rapid onset of symptoms. She's saying anyone exposed should seek immediate treatment, but she's also acknowledging that current interventions have limited effectiveness. They're working with the CDC and NIH to fast-track research into antivirals and vaccines, but that takes time. How much time? Someone asked that question. The commissioner says weeks at minimum, possibly months, for a fully tested and approved treatment. Weeks or months. And what happens to people infected in the meantime? She's talking about isolation protocols now. Anyone showing symptoms needs to be quarantined to prevent spread. Family members of the infected should self-isolate and monitor for symptoms. Buildings where cases have been identified will be placed under temporary quarantine while contacts are traced. The emergency management director is explaining enforcement. Police and National Guard will be establishing checkpoints at key locations. Travel in and out of the city will be restricted to essential personnel only. Violations of quarantine orders will result in arrest. This is mandatory, not advisory. They're implementing martial law, not calling it that, but that's what it is. Military control of civilian movement, suspension of normal rights in the name of public safety. I understand the logic. Desperate times, desperate measures, but I'm also thinking about what happens when you give authorities this much power and the crisis doesn't resolve quickly. Questions from reporters now. Someone asking about food distribution. The emergency management director says grocery stores will remain open with limited hours, and they're setting up distribution centers in each borough for people unable to leave their homes. Someone else asking about hospitals at capacity. The health commissioner says they're converting convention centers and public spaces into treatment facilities and bringing in medical personnel from outside the affected area. The reporter just asked the question everyone's thinking, is this containable? Long pause. The mayor says they're doing everything possible to contain it, but success depends on public cooperation and rapid development of effective treatments. That's not a yes. That's a politician's non-answer that actually tells you everything. We're wrapping up the press conference. The mayor is asking people to stay calm, follow guidance, and look out for their neighbors. She's saying we'll get through this together. I want to believe that. I want to believe in the competence of institutions and the resilience of communities, but I've seen how fast things can fall apart, and we're only at the beginning of this. It's 8:15 now, and the reality of what was just announced is sinking in. The city is shut down. I'm in this building, and I can leave to go home, but then what? Sit in my apartment with my family and wait. Wait for what? News of a cure. News that it's spreading faster. News that quarantine failed and the infection is everywhere. I think I need to stay here, keep broadcasting. People need information, and someone has to deliver it. My wife understands. She's getting supplies, securing our apartment, making sure our daughter understands what's happening without completely terrifying her. We're fortunate in a way. We have a home, food, some savings to weather a period without work. Not everyone has that. I'm thinking about the vulnerable populations, homeless individuals, people in poverty, those with chronic health conditions. They're at higher risk of exposure and less able to shelter safely. The official response needs to account for them, but I'm not sure it does. Emergency plans tend to assume everyone has resources and options, and that's just not reality. The news is showing footage of supermarkets now, and it's chaos. People fighting over supplies, shelves emptied, store employees overwhelmed. This is the immediate human response to crisis: hoarding, self-preservation, breakdown of social norms. We're not there yet in terms of complete collapse, but you can see it starting. Police are being deployed to grocery stores and pharmacies to prevent looting and maintain order. That's pulling them away from other duties, stretching resources. And if officers start getting infected, if the police force is depleted by illness, who maintains order? Then I'm looking at maps showing confirmed cases, and they're distributed across the entire metro area. No clear geographic pattern, no single source we can trace it back to. Either it's been circulating longer than we realized, or it's spreading through pathways we don't understand yet. Air travel, public transit, food supply, water. How many vectors are there? The CDC team landed about 30 minutes ago and is heading to Newark Medical Center to examine patients and collect samples. They're the experts. They have resources and knowledge that local health officials don't, but they're also walking into a situation that's already beyond the early containment stage. This isn't a handful of cases anymore. This is community transmission on a significant scale. Someone from the CDC is giving a statement now. She's a disease ecologist trying to explain what likely happened. She's talking about zoonotic spillover when a pathogen jumps from animals to humans. Happened with COVID, Ebola, SARS, countless others. The virus that causes rabies exists in wildlife populations, and mutations occur naturally. Most don't result in viable new strains, but occasionally one emerges that's better adapted to spread in humans. She's saying this variant appears to have several key mutations that explain its behavior: faster replication in neural tissue, increased viral load in saliva, changes to surface proteins that enhance transmission. Essentially, evolution produced a version of rabies optimized for spreading between people. And once it got into dense human populations, it took off. Can it be stopped? She's hedging. Says containment is still possible if measures are implemented rigorously and treatment options are identified quickly. But she's also saying the window for containment is narrow, possibly days, and if this spreads beyond the current affected region, it becomes exponentially harder to control.
Days, we have days to stop this, or it becomes unstoppable.
That's what she's saying without saying it directly.
I need to talk about what unstoppable means in this context. If a highly lethal, rapidly spreading pathogen can't be contained, it propagates through the entire susceptible population. With modern transportation, that's a global population. Cases appear in new cities, new countries, local outbreaks become regional, regional becomes national, national becomes pandemic, and unlike COVID, where many infected people survived, this thing seems to kill most of its hosts. The mortality rate from symptomatic rabies is near 100%.
So we're potentially looking at a global event with massive casualties if containment fails. I hate thinking in those terms. It feels like catastrophizing, like giving in to fear, but it's also just math and biology. A pathogen doesn't care about our hopes or our institutions. It just spreads and kills according to its nature. The governor is speaking now from the state capitol. She's ordering all non-essential businesses statewide to close. She's implementing travel restrictions on all major highways. She's activating the entire National Guard and requesting federal assistance. This is no longer just a city problem. The state is going into lockdown. She's also addressing reports of people trying to flee the affected areas. She's saying roadblocks are being established and anyone attempting to leave will be turned back unless they can prove they're uninfected. That's going to be controversial. You can't force people to stay in a plague zone, but you also can't let them spread infection to unaffected areas. There's no good answer. I'm seeing video now of the checkpoints going up, military vehicles, soldiers with rifles, barriers across highways. It looks like something from a movie, not something that happens in reality. But here we are. Reality is stranger and darker than fiction right now.
How do you prove you're uninfected?
That's a practical problem. We don't have rapid tests for this. We don't even have a confirmed diagnostic method yet. So checkpoints are just looking for symptoms, which means anyone asymptomatic could pass through and spread infection elsewhere. The checkpoint system is security theater more than actual containment. Unless they're not letting anyone through at all. Unless the quarantine is absolute, trap everyone inside the affected zone and wait for the infection to burn through the population. That would be effective from a containment standpoint, but it's also unconscionable. You'd be condemning everyone inside to potential infection and death to protect people outside. No, I don't think it'll come to that. I think authorities will allow passage for people who test negative once testing is available. But what if testing takes weeks to develop? What if people are trapped here watching the infection spread, unable to leave, waiting for help that doesn't come in time? It's 9 now. 3 hours since I first mentioned this story on air. 3 hours ago was concerning hospital reports. Now it's martial law and quarantine. The speed of escalation is dizzying. What will the next 3 hours bring? My producer is showing me something on her phone. Social media is full of videos from overnight people being attacked, fleeing from infected individuals, chaos in the streets. Some of these are clearly real, others might be fake or from unrelated incidents being misattributed, but the overall picture is of a city in the early stages of breakdown. One video shows a police officer being overwhelmed by multiple infected individuals. The officer is trying to use a taser, but it's not stopping them. They keep coming and the video cuts off before we see what happens. I hope the officers survive, but I'm not optimistic. Another video from an apartment building. Someone filming from their window as infected people wander the street below, attacking anyone they encounter. The movements are jerky, uncoordinated, but persistent. They're not running, just walking with purpose toward anyone they see. And when they reach someone, the attack is savage and sustained. This is what the virus does. It takes a human being and reduces them to a biological weapon, a delivery mechanism for spreading itself further. There's no consciousness left, no humanity, just the viral imperative to bite, to infect, to propagate.
I'm having trouble processing this. The cognitive dissonance between the normal-looking city outside my window and the horror in these videos is too large. Both can't be true simultaneously, but they are. Different parts of the city are experiencing different realities right now. Some neighborhoods still quiet and unaware, others descending into chaos. The infected seem to cluster. Once one appears, others follow. Maybe they're drawn to the sounds of attack, or maybe the virus is causing them to seek out groups. Either way, it creates these pockets of intense danger surrounded by relative calm. You could walk 1 block and be fine, turn a corner and be in the middle of a nightmare. Emergency services are being overwhelmed. 911 call centers can't keep up with the volume. Police and ambulances are being dispatched to the most critical situations, but there aren't enough units to respond to everything. People are on their own in many cases, defending themselves or fleeing, hoping they don't encounter infected. The mayor said utilities would be maintained, but I'm wondering how long that's realistic. Power plants, water treatment facilities, they need personnel to operate. If those workers get sick or decide it's too dangerous to come to work, infrastructure starts failing. We take electricity and running water for granted until we don't have them, and then everything gets exponentially harder. Hey, I should eat something, but I'm not hungry.
Adrenaline and anxiety are suppressing appetite. I've got some snacks here in the studio. Water. I can stay here for a while. Keep broadcasting as long as power holds and the building remains secure. Security? That's something I need to think about. This building has security guards on the ground floor, but are they still at their posts? Are they armed? If infected, get into the building. Is there a protocol? I should probably check on that, make sure we're not sitting here exposed. My producer is going to go down and talk to security, see what the situation is. I'll keep monitoring news feeds and taking information from official sources. The CDC official is giving another update. They've examined multiple patients and collected tissue samples for analysis. Preliminary genetic sequencing confirms this is a rabies variant, specifically a strain that shares characteristics with bat rabies, but with significant mutations in key genes. The mutations affect how the virus interacts with nerve cells and how it replicates. She's explaining that normal rabies travels slowly along nerve pathways from the bite site to the brain. This variant moves much faster, possibly through the bloodstream, in addition to neural routes. That's why symptoms appear in hours rather than weeks. The virus reaches the brain quickly and begins causing damage before the immune system can mount an effective response.
Is there any treatment?
The reporter asking that question sounds desperate. The CDC official is saying they're testing existing antivirals, but so far nothing is showing efficacy. The virus is too different from other pathogens we have treatments for. They're working on developing new approaches, but it's a process that takes time. There's that word again, time. We need time that we don't have. Every hour the virus spreads further, infects more people, kills more hosts. The race is between scientific discovery and exponential growth has a head start. She's recommending isolation of infected individuals and extreme caution for healthcare workers, full protective equipment, no direct contact, treat it like the most dangerous pathogen we know. But she's also being realistic. She's saying some people will be exposed despite precautions, and those people need to be monitored and isolated at the first sign of symptoms.
What about a vaccine? Can we vaccinate the uninfected to prevent spread?
She's saying vaccine development is a months-long process, even in emergency circumstances. You have to identify the right antigens, test for effectiveness and safety, manufacture billions of doses. By the time a vaccine is ready, this outbreak will be long over, one way or another. One way or another, meaning either contained or everyone's dead or infected. Those are the outcomes we're looking at. I'm watching the case count update. 286 confirmed cases now in this metro area alone, and reports are coming in from other cities. Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., all reporting cases. The geographic spread is widening. This isn't contained to the Northeast anymore. It's moving. Air travel, that's the mechanism. Someone infected but not yet symptomatic boards a plane, travels to another city, develops symptoms after arrival, or infects someone else on the plane who carries it further. We've shut down the city now, but before that, how many people left? How many carriers are out there spreading it to unaffected areas? The FAA is grounding all flights in and out of affected cities. Airports are closed, planes turned around or diverted. That should slow the spread through air travel, but it's probably too late to prevent seeding in other regions. I think about the global implications. If this is in multiple U.S. cities, it's likely already in other countries. International travelers, cargo flights, countless pathways for spread, and not every country has the resources to respond the way we are. Limited healthcare infrastructure, less governmental capacity, higher population density in some places. This could be catastrophic on a global scale. My producer is back. She talked to security, and there are still 2 guards on duty, both armed. They've locked all entrances except the main door, and they're screening anyone who wants to enter. Looking for symptoms, denying access to anyone who seems sick. It's something, though, I'm not sure how effective it'll be if things really deteriorate. She also says she saw infected people on the street from the lobby windows. 3 of them wandering near the building, attacking a delivery person who was trying to get to a truck. The guards went out to help, but by the time they intervened, the delivery person was bitten. Paramedics were called, but haven't arrived yet, probably overwhelmed with calls. So the infection is right outside now, not across the city, not in some other neighborhood. Right here within sight of this building. That changes the psychological equation. This is no longer abstract threat. This is immediate danger. I need to let listeners know what to do if they encounter infected individuals. Run. That's the first advice. Don't try to help them. Don't try to restrain them. Don't engage. Just get away as fast as possible. If you're cornered, use whatever you have to create distance. Chairs, doors, anything between you and them. If you're bitten, seek medical treatment immediately. but also recognize that treatment options are limited. Isolate yourself from others, especially family members. Don't spread the infection further, even if it means dying alone. That's a horrible thing to ask of people, but it's necessary to prevent additional casualties. To secure your location, lock doors and windows, barricade if possible. The infected don't seem to be intelligent enough to bypass barriers, so a locked door will stop them. Stay quiet, don't attract attention. They respond to sound and movement, so if you're silent and still, they might pass by. Stock food and water. If you're sheltering in place, you need supplies for an extended period. Don't assume this will be over quickly. Don't assume help is coming. Be self-sufficient as much as possible. Stay informed. Keep a radio or internet connection if available. Information will be crucial for knowing when it's safe to emerge, where help is being provided, what the status of the outbreak is. These are survival instructions now, not health guidelines, not recommendations. Survival instructions for a city under siege by a disease that turns people into threats. It's almost 10 and I've been on air for 4 hours straight. I should take a break, but I don't want to leave the microphone. As long as I'm talking, I'm doing something useful. I'm providing information and maybe comfort to people listening. If I stop, if I leave, what happens to the people relying on this broadcast? But I also need to take care of myself. I'm going to step away for 10 minutes, use the restroom, get some water, check in with my family. I'll put on some emergency broadcast messages that play on loop, and then I'll be right back.
10 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Stay with Tenderwood if...
I'm back. Talked to my wife briefly. They're okay. Apartment is secure. They've got food for a couple weeks. My daughter is scared but handling it. Kids are resilient in ways adults aren't. She's treating it like an adventure almost. Building a fort in the living room, making plans for what they'll do during lockdown. I wish I had that perspective. For me, this feels like the end of something. Not necessarily the end of the world, but the end of the world as it was. Even if we contain this, even if most people survive, society will be different after. The trust in institutions, the sense of safety in daily life, the assumption that tomorrow will be basically like today, all of that is breaking down. The news is reporting widespread looting in some neighborhoods, not just food and supplies, but electronics, valuables, anything people can grab. Police aren't responding to property crimes right now because they're focused on violent incidents and infection control. So some people are taking advantage of the chaos to enrich themselves.
I understand the impulse.
If civilization is ending, why not grab what you can? But it also accelerates the breakdown. Once looting starts, once law enforcement becomes ineffective, social order collapses. We're social animals, and we rely on trust and cooperation to function. When that breaks, we revert to something more primitive. There are also reports of people helping each other, neighbors checking on elderly residents, people sharing supplies, volunteers organizing to distribute food, the best and worst of humanity on display simultaneously. Crisis reveals character, and you're seeing both heroism and villainy. I want to believe the helpers will outnumber the looters. I want to believe we'll come together rather than fragment, but I've studied enough history to know that isn't guaranteed. Sometimes societies survive catastrophe and rebuild stronger. Sometimes they collapse completely and don't recover for generations. The governor is speaking again. Federal assistance has been approved. FEMA is deploying. Military units are being mobilized. Medical supplies are en route. The federal government is treating this as a national emergency, which means resources from across the country will be directed here. It's good news, theoretically. More personnel, more equipment, more expertise. But it also means the federal government recognizes this as a threat to the entire nation, not just a regional problem. They're mobilizing because they know if it's not stopped here, it spreads everywhere. The president is scheduled to address the nation at noon. I'll be covering that live. I'm curious what the messaging will be. Reassurance that the government has things under control. Acknowledgement of the severity and call for unity, or something else entirely. Political leaders tend to downplay crises to avoid panic, but there's a point where downplaying becomes lying and people lose trust. I think we're past that point. People can see what's happening. They need honesty, even if the honest message is we're in trouble and we need everyone working together to survive this. Case count is at 412 in this metro area, growing exponentially just as predicted. And each of those cases represents a person who was healthy yesterday and is either dying or dead today. 412 tragedies, 412 families devastated.
How many more tomorrow? Double.
triple. At what point do we run out of capacity to count? Hospitals have stopped admitting new patients unless they're critical. There's no treatment anyway, and keeping infected people in hospitals just exposes staff and other patients. The new guidance is to isolate at home if symptomatic. Stay away from others, lock yourself in a room, wait for the disease to run its course. Essentially, go home to die. That's not being said explicitly, but it's the implication. We can't save you, so don't burden the healthcare system. Die quietly so we can focus on prevention and developing treatments. Brutal, but maybe necessary. Triage on a massive scale. Save who you can, accept losses you can't prevent, focus resources where they'll have the most impact. I'm hearing sirens constantly now. Ambulances, police, fire trucks. The background soundscape of a city in emergency. It's been going for hours, and I'm almost used to it. Almost, but every time I notice it again, it's a reminder that outside this studio, people are suffering and dying. The power flickered just now, just for a second, but enough to notice. The lights dimmed, the computer screens blinked, and then everything came back. But it's a warning sign. Power infrastructure is vulnerable, and if we start having outages, everything gets harder. I'm going to check with engineering, make sure we have backup power for the station. We need to stay on air. This broadcast might be one of the few reliable sources of information for people, and if we go dark, they're left alone with their fear. Engineering says we have a generator that can run for about 72 hours if main power fails. After that, we need fuel, which might be hard to get depending on the situation. So we have 3 days of guaranteed broadcast capability, then it becomes uncertain. 3 days. That's the time frame for a lot of things right now. Food supplies in many homes, water, if infrastructure fails, generator fuel, medical supplies. We're operating on short timelines with limited buffers. Any disruption cascades into crisis. I'm trying to think about what happens if this goes long term, not days, but weeks or months. How do you sustain a city under quarantine for that duration? You need continuous supply of food, water, power, medicine. You need waste management because garbage and sewage don't just disappear. You need communication systems to coordinate everything. All of that requires workers, and workers require safety. If conditions deteriorate to the point where essential personnel won't or can't come to work, systems fail. And once systems start failing, the cascade accelerates. No power means no water pumping. No water means sanitation failures. Sanitation failures mean disease outbreaks beyond just the rabies variant. Everything's connected, and breaking one link threatens the whole chain. The military arriving should help with some of that. They have logistics expertise, supply chain management, the ability to operate in hostile environments, but they're also not designed for sustained civilian support operations. They can stabilize a situation, provide temporary relief, but governing a city long-term isn't their role. I keep coming back to the fundamental question, how long can this last? When does it end? And I don't have an answer because nobody does. It ends when we develop effective treatment, or when the infection burns through the susceptible population, or when society collapses completely and there's nothing left to organize. Those are the options. It's 10:30, and I'm going to shift focus to practical information for a bit. Let me talk about water safety, food storage, basic medical care, things people can use if they're on their own for a while.
Water first.
If municipal water continues flowing, it should be safe to drink, assuming treatment plants are still operating. But if you're worried or notice any change in water quality, you can boil it for at least 1 minute to kill pathogens. You can also use purification tablets or filters if you have them. Store water in clean containers and assume you need about 1 gallon per person per day for drinking and basic hygiene. Food. Focus on non-perishables, canned goods, dried pasta, rice, beans. Things that don't require refrigeration and have long shelf lives. Ration carefully if you're not sure when you'll get more supplies. It's better to be hungry than to run out completely. Medicine. If you take prescription medications, hopefully you have at least a month's supply. If not, contact your doctor or pharmacy to get refills while you still can. For basic first aid, have bandages, antiseptic, pain relievers. Nothing will help if you're infected with the virus, but you still need to treat ordinary injuries and illnesses. Sanitation. If water service is interrupted, toilets won't flush. You'll need to figure out waste disposal, bag waste, and store it away from living areas if possible. It's unpleasant but necessary to prevent disease. Communication. Keep phones charged. If power fails, preserve battery life by limiting use. A battery-powered or hand-crank radio like the one you're hopefully listening to me on now is essential for receiving information. Security, lock your doors and windows. Be aware of who's around you. Trust carefully. In crisis, some people become threats. Protect yourself and your family first. These are things everyone should know, but in normal times we don't think about. We rely on infrastructure and systems to handle it. Now, those systems are stressed or failing, and individuals need to be self-sufficient. I sound like a prepper, like one of those people who's been planning for societal collapse for years. Maybe they were right to prepare. Maybe the rest of us were naive to think it couldn't happen. The news is showing footage from military units entering the city, convoys of vehicles, soldiers in full gear, setting up checkpoints and staging areas. It's a massive deployment, thousands of personnel. The show of force is intended to be reassuring, to demonstrate that authorities are in control. But I look at those soldiers and I wonder what they're thinking. They're being sent into a city with a deadly contagious disease, being asked to maintain order among potentially millions of infected people. Some of them won't come home. Some will get infected despite precautions. They know that, and they're doing it anyway because it's their duty.
There's something noble in that, the sacrifice for the greater good, but it's also tragic that such sacrifice is necessary.
A reporter is interviewing a colonel who's overseeing the deployment. He's explaining that their primary mission is to support civilian authorities in maintaining quarantine and distributing supplies. They're not there to fight, though they're prepared to use force if necessary to protect themselves and maintain order. What does force look like in this context? Shooting infected people who pose a threat, firing on uninfected people who try to break quarantine. The rules of engagement must be complex and morally fraught. You're asking soldiers to potentially kill American civilians to prevent disease spread.
I hope it doesn't come to that. I hope people comply with quarantine voluntarily, and the military presence is enough to deter bad actors without requiring actual violence. But hope isn't a strategy, and I suspect we'll see situations where force is used before this is over.
It's 11 now, and I've been broadcasting for 5 hours. My voice is getting tired, throat dry. I'm drinking water, but talking continuously takes a toll. I need to pace myself if I'm going to keep this up. The station manager just called. She's not in the building. She's sheltering at home, but she wanted to check that we're still operational. I told her, yes, we're broadcasting, and I intend to keep going as long as possible. She said corporate is supporting that decision, that all their stations are shifting to emergency coverage, that this is what we exist for. It's good to have that validation. I was worried they might pull the plug, decide it's too dangerous to keep staff in the building, but they understand the importance of maintaining communication with the public. She also warned me that some stations have already gone offline. Equipment failures, staff unable to get to work, buildings compromised by infected. The information ecosystem is fragmenting, which means the stations still operating have more responsibility to keep broadcasting. I'm looking at my list of affiliate stations that normally carry some of our programming. About half aren't responding. Either they're off air or they're not answering coordination calls. The network is breaking down already. Local TV news is still broadcasting, at least the major stations, but their footage is increasingly from remote cameras or drones rather than field reporters. Too dangerous to have camera crews out in affected areas, so they're showing aerial shots of empty streets, burning buildings, clusters of infected wandering. One shot shows what looks like hundreds of infected people gathered in a plaza, just standing there, swaying slightly, occasionally turning toward movement. It's like something from a nightmare. The reporter is speculating that they're drawn to gathering points for some reason, maybe instinct, or maybe the virus is directing behavior to maximize spread. If they cluster in predictable locations, that could actually help containment, easier to avoid or isolate them if they're not randomly distributed. But it also creates these intense danger zones that are impossible to traverse. The president is going to speak in an hour. I'm expecting a formal declaration of national emergency, mobilization of all federal resources, maybe restrictions on interstate travel. The question is whether he'll be honest about the severity or try to sugarcoat it. Leadership during crisis requires balancing transparency with preventing panic. You need to tell people the truth so they can make informed decisions, but you also can't cause mass hysteria that makes everything worse. It's a difficult line to walk. I think people are smart enough to handle the truth. They can see what's happening. Lying to them just destroys trust and makes coordination harder. Better to say this is bad, we're working on it, here's what you need to do. People respond well to clear direction even in terrible circumstances. My daughter just texted me. She's asking if I'm safe when I'm coming home. I told her I'm safe in the studio and I need to keep working, but I'll come home as soon as I can. She sent back a heart emoji. Such a small thing, but it made me emotional. The normalcy of a text from my kid while the world is ending. I need to hold on to those small human moments. They're what we're fighting to preserve. Not abstract concepts of civilization, but the ability to text your daughter, to have a family to go home to have tomorrow be possible. The case count just updated, 563 confirmed cases in this metro area, over 1,000 now across all affected cities. The doubling time looks like it's around 3 to 4 hours. If that rate continues, we'll have tens of thousands of cases by tomorrow, hundreds of thousands by the day after. Exponential growth is relentless. It starts slow, feels manageable, then suddenly overwhelms everything. We're in the phase where it still feels like numbers on a screen. Soon it'll be impossible to count, impossible to track, just mass casualties on a scale we haven't seen in modern history.
Unless something changes, unless treatment works or quarantine holds or the virus burns out for some reason, I have to believe those possibilities exist. Otherwise, what's the point of continuing? I'm reading reports from other countries now. The UK has confirmed cases in London, France, in Paris, Germany, Italy, Spain. It's already global. The isolation we attempted came too late. This is a pandemic now, not an outbreak.
Different countries are implementing different responses. Some are following our model with lockdowns and military deployment. Others are trying more targeted approaches, isolating only confirmed cases. A few are denying the severity entirely, calling it foreign propaganda or media exaggeration. Those countries that aren't taking it seriously will pay the price. The virus doesn't care about politics or national pride. It spreads according to biological imperatives, and societies that don't respond appropriately will be devastated. I wonder if there are places remote enough to avoid infection entirely. Small islands, isolated communities, places with no connection to the global system. They might survive this if they close themselves off completely. Humanity could continue even if major population centers fall. That's cold comfort. The loss of billions of people, the collapse of technological civilization, reverting to isolated pockets of survivors. But it would be survival. The species would continue. Evolution doesn't care about individuals or societies, just whether genes propagate. In the bleakest scenario, enough humans would survive somewhere to eventually rebuild. I'm getting too dark. Let me refocus on the present, on information people can use now. The Red Cross is setting up shelters for people displaced by the outbreak. If you're unable to stay in your home for any reason, there are safe locations with food, water, and basic supplies. The locations are being broadcast on emergency alert systems and listed on government websites if you have internet access. Food distribution centers are operating in each borough. Bring identification if possible, but they're not turning anyone away. The goal is to prevent hunger from becoming an additional crisis while people shelter in place. Medical hotlines are available for people experiencing symptoms or worried about exposure. The number is 1-800-CDC-INFO. They can provide guidance on what to do and where to go for treatment if needed. Mental health resources are also available. Crisis counselors are standing by for people experiencing anxiety, fear, or other psychological distress. The number for that is 1-800-273-8255. It's okay to not be okay right now. This is traumatic and people need support. These resources exist and people should use them. We're still a functioning society with systems designed to help. Those systems are strained, but they're not broken yet. It's 11:30 and I'm going to take another short break before the president's address. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Stay with 104.7 FM. Back, hydrated, stretch my legs a bit. I'm settling in for the long haul here. As long as power holds and I'm able, I'll keep broadcasting. The city outside looks different now. I've been glancing out the window periodically, and the streets that were busy with normal traffic this morning are mostly empty now. A few vehicles, police and military mostly, occasional civilians moving quickly from building to building. But the vibrant urban activity is gone. It's a ghost town. I could see smoke rising in a few places. Fires burning unchecked because fire departments can't respond to everything. Buildings will burn until they run out of fuel, then smolder. Hopefully they don't spread to occupied structures, but there's no guarantee. The infrastructure that keeps a city functioning requires constant human attention. Without that, things break down. We're seeing the beginning of that process. My producer is monitoring social media, and she's showing me some of the posts. A lot of fear and confusion, people asking what to do, where to go, whether rumors are true, but also some misinformation, claims that this is a government bioweapon or that the infection can spread through air or that there's a cure being withheld from the public. I need to address some of those directly. This is not a bioweapon. All evidence points to a natural viral mutation, possibly accelerated by environmental factors, but not deliberately created. The infection spreads through bodily fluids, primarily saliva from bites, not through air, and there is no cure being withheld. Scientists are working desperately to find treatment options, but viruses are complex, and developing effective interventions takes time. Misinformation during crisis is dangerous. It leads to poor decisions, wasted resources, and loss of life. Please rely on official sources, government health departments, the CDC, reputable news organizations, not random social media posts or conspiracy theories. I understand the impulse to find patterns, to assign blame, to believe there's some hidden truth. It's a way of feeling like you have control or understanding, but sometimes there is no hidden truth. Sometimes bad things happen because of chance and biology, not because of conspiracies. The president is about to speak. I'm switching over to the network feed now. He's at the podium in the White House, flanked by health officials and military brass. He looks tired, which is actually somewhat reassuring. Better that he looks like he understands the gravity than if he was smiling and confident. He's starting with acknowledgement of the crisis, confirming that the United States is facing an unprecedented public health emergency caused by a novel viral pathogen. He's declaring a national emergency and invoking federal powers to coordinate response across all agencies and states. All interstate travel is being restricted to essential personnel only. Checkpoints are being established on major highways. Airports are closed to commercial traffic. The goal is to prevent spread from affected areas to unaffected regions.
A nationwide curfew is being implemented. Everyone must be in their homes from dusk to dawn. This is to prevent nighttime movement of infected individuals and to allow law enforcement to identify and address threats more easily. The military is being deployed in support of civilian authorities across the country, not just in affected areas, but everywhere, to maintain order and prepare for potential outbreak expansion. All schools, non-essential businesses, and public gatherings are prohibited nationwide. The entire country is going into lockdown, not just affected cities. That's a massive step. Shutting down the entire economy, restricting movement of 330 million people. It will have enormous consequences even if it works. But if it doesn't work, if the infection spreads anyway, we'll have crashed the economy for nothing. He's talking about the scientific response now. Billions of dollars in emergency funding for research into treatments and vaccines, collaboration with pharmaceutical companies, universities, research institutes globally, fast-tracking every regulatory process to get treatments to people as quickly as possible. International cooperation, working with other nations to share data, coordinate responses, provide mutual aid. This is a global crisis requiring global cooperation.
He's trying to be reassuring, saying American strength and resilience will see us through this, that we've faced challenges before and overcome them, that we will again.
I want to believe that. I want to believe in American exceptionalism and the power of determination. But this virus doesn't care about any of that. It will spread or not based on biological factors and our ability to contain it. No amount of patriotic rhetoric changes the math.
He's taking questions now. A reporter asking about casualties. The president is saying numbers are still being compiled, but he acknowledges hundreds have died already, with many more critically ill. He's not giving specific numbers, probably because they're higher than he wants to admit publicly. Another reporter asking about timeline for treatment. The president is deferring to the health officials. The NIH director is saying they've identified several promising antiviral compounds that might be effective. They're starting human trials immediately, bypassing normal safety protocols given the emergency. results within days on whether anything works. Days, not hours. More people will die while we wait for results, but if something works, it could change everything. One effective treatment could turn this from existential crisis to manageable outbreak. Someone asking about enforcement of restrictions. The president is saying local and state police will be primary, supported by National Guard and active military where needed. Anyone violating quarantine or curfew will face arrest and prosecution. How do you arrest and prosecute thousands or millions of people if compliance is low? You don't. You make examples of some to deter others, and you accept that enforcement will be imperfect. But the threat of consequences might be enough to get most people to comply. Final question about economic impact. The president acknowledging this will be severe. Markets are closed to prevent panic selling. Government is preparing stimulus packages to support affected industries and individuals, but the priority is saving lives, and economic concerns are secondary. Easy to say when you're not worried about losing your job or feeding your family. For many people, economic concerns are survival concerns. You can't shelter in place if you can't afford food. You can't isolate if you're evicted from your home. The safety net will need to be expanded massively to support people through this. Whether the government can do that effectively in the midst of everything else happening remains to be seen. The president is finishing up final appeal for unity, courage, and following guidance from authorities. Then he's gone, leaving the podium to the health officials for further technical questions. It's noon now, 6 hours since I first mentioned this story. It's consumed the entire day, the entire world, and we're just getting started. This will go on for days, weeks, maybe longer. I'm going to keep broadcasting, keep providing information, context, hopefully some comfort to people listening. That's all I can do. Stay on air, stay present, give people a voice to listen to so they know they're not alone. If you're out there listening, wherever you are, whatever your situation, know that we're in this together. I'm here with you. We're all here together trying to survive and help each other survive. That has to count for something. Stay safe. Stay informed. Stay with 1004.7 FM. Daniel Rothman, continuing coverage of the crisis. The phone lines are completely jammed now. We've had to disable the call-in system because it was overloading our equipment. People desperately trying to reach out, to share information, to hear a human voice. I wish I could talk to each of them, but it's not physically possible. All I can do is keep talking into this microphone and hope it reaches the people who need it. I'm looking at the latest updates from the hospitals, and they've stopped publishing case numbers. The last count I saw was over 800 in this metro area alone, but that was 20 minutes ago. The tracking systems can't keep up anymore. We've moved beyond counting individual cases to assessing the overall situation, and the overall situation is deteriorating rapidly. Emergency rooms have been completely overwhelmed. Several hospitals have had to evacuate after infected patients broke containment and attacked staff. Medical personnel are fleeing their posts, which I don't blame them for. You can't expect people to sacrifice themselves when there's no treatment to offer anyway. The whole healthcare system is collapsing in real time. I'm hearing reports of hospitals being sealed off entirely, locked down with patients and staff inside, quarantined until the infection runs its course. That's a death sentence for everyone trapped inside, but it prevents spread to the surrounding community. Cold calculus of triage on a massive scale. The morgues are beyond capacity. Bodies are being stored in refrigerated trucks, and even those are filling up. The city is setting up temporary facilities, but the death rate is exceeding our ability to handle remains properly. We're going to have public health crises beyond just the virus if bodies aren't managed correctly. I need to talk about something difficult. If someone in your household becomes infected, you need to isolate them immediately. Lock them in a room if possible. I know that sounds cruel, but an infected person will attack anyone nearby, including family. You cannot help them, and staying close only means you'll be infected too. If you're infected yourself, if you've been bitten and you're starting to feel symptoms, you need to separate yourself from your loved ones. Go into a room alone, lock the door, and don't come out. I know that's asking people to face death alone, to deny themselves the comfort of family in their final hours, but it's the only way to prevent spreading the infection further. This is the impossible situation we're in. The normal human responses to illness and death, caring for the sick, being present for dying loved ones, those responses will get you killed now. You have to override every instinct, every emotional need, and act with cold rationality. It goes against everything we are as social creatures. My producer just told me that several radio stations have gone silent in the last hour. Equipment failures or staff abandoning their posts. We don't know, but the number of active broadcasts is shrinking. We're becoming one of the few voices still transmitting in this region. That increases the responsibility on me. People might be relying on this broadcast as their only source of information. I can't speculate wildly or spread rumors. I need to stick to confirmed facts and practical guidance, even when the confirmed facts are terrifying. The military checkpoints are reporting people trying to break through, desperate families attempting to flee the quarantine zone, ramming barricades with vehicles, trying to force their way past soldiers. Some checkpoints have opened fire to stop them. Civilian casualties at the hands of our own military trying to contain this outbreak. So I understand both sides. The families just want to survive, to get somewhere safe. The soldiers are following orders to maintain quarantine and prevent spread. Both are acting rationally from their perspectives. But the result is Americans shooting Americans, and that's a tragedy compounding the tragedy of the virus itself. How long can quarantine hold under those conditions? If thousands of people are trying to leave and soldiers have to shoot to stop them, at some point the quarantine becomes militarily untenable. You'd need to build actual walls, establish defensive positions, treat it like a siege. I don't know if we have the resources or will to do that. And if quarantine fails, if infected people escape the zone, they carry the virus to new areas, whole new outbreaks starting from each escaped carrier. The containment strategy collapses completely. I'm watching news footage of the military deployment, and the scale is staggering. Thousands of troops, armored vehicles, helicopters. It looks like an invasion or a war zone, except the enemy is invisible. You can't shoot a virus. You can only shoot the people carrying it, and that's not a war anyone wants to fight. The news anchor is interviewing a virologist from Johns Hopkins remotely. She's explaining the science behind why this variant is so dangerous. The mutations aren't just in one area of the virus. They're across multiple genes affecting replication, transmission, and neurological impact. It's like the virus hit the evolutionary jackpot, multiple beneficial mutations all at once. Could that happen naturally? The anchor is asking the exact question I'm thinking. The virologist is hesitant. She's saying it's statistically unlikely, but not impossible. Viruses mutate constantly, and occasionally multiple mutations can occur together. But the combination of changes in this variant is remarkably well suited for human transmission, almost suspiciously so. She's not saying bioweapon. She's being careful not to make that claim, but the implication is there. Whether this emerged naturally or was engineered, the result is the same. We're dealing with something unprecedented and highly lethal. I don't think it matters at this point where it came from. Whether it's natural or artificial, the response is the same. Contain it, treat it, survive it. Attribution and accountability can come later if there is a later. It's 12:30 now, and I need to eat something. I've been running on adrenaline and coffee, but my body needs fuel. I've got some protein bars here in the studio, not appetizing, but functional. While I eat, I want to share some messages from listeners that came in before we disabled the phones. People sharing their situations, their fears, their determination to survive. One message from a nurse at Newark Medical. She says the hospital is hell. Infected patients everywhere, staff being attacked, no security left because the guards fled. She's locked herself in a supply closet and can hear infected people in the hallways. She doesn't think she's getting out alive, but she wanted someone to know she tried. She wants her family to know she loves them. That message came in at 11:45. I don't know if she's still alive now. I hope she found a way out, but statistically, probably not. Another casualty of this nightmare. Another message from a father in Queens. He says his son was bitten yesterday, started showing symptoms this morning, and he had to lock him in the basement. He can hear his son screaming and banging on the door, but he's not letting him out. He's asking if there's any hope, any treatment coming that might save his son. I don't have an answer for him. The trials for antiviral treatments are just beginning. Even if something works, it'll be days before it's available, and his son probably doesn't have days. The honest answer is no, there's no hope for his son. But I can't say that on air. I can't destroy what little hope people are clinging to. So I equivocate. I say treatments are being tested. Results should be available soon to keep monitoring official announcements. It's not quite a lie, but it's not the truth either. The truth is his son is going to die, and all he can do is make sure the rest of his family doesn't die with him. A message from a woman in Brooklyn. She's alone in her apartment, and she can hear infected people in the hallway. They've been trying to break down her door for the past hour. She's pushed furniture against it, but she doesn't know how long it'll hold. She's asking if police are coming, if anyone is coming to help. No, nobody's coming. Emergency services are overwhelmed and not responding to most calls. She's on her own. I want to tell her to find a weapon, defend herself, escape through a window if possible, but I don't know her specific situation. Maybe she's on the 10th floor and windows aren't an option. Maybe she has no weapon available. All I can say is be resourceful, be brave, and fight to survive. It feels inadequate, but it's all I have. These messages are breaking my heart. Real people, real suffering, and I'm sitting here safe in a studio, unable to help any of them. The powerlessness is crushing. I can broadcast information, but I can't save anyone. I can't stop the virus, can't protect people, can't do anything except talk. But maybe talking matters. Maybe someone listening will hear something that helps them survive. Maybe providing information and human connection is valuable, even if I can't directly save lives. I have to believe that, or there's no point in continuing. I'm finishing my protein bar and drinking water. Need to stay hydrated. The building climate control is still working, which is good. If that fails and temperature rises, this studio will become uncomfortable quickly. The news is showing aerial footage of the city now, drone cameras providing an overview. Large sections look abandoned. Empty streets, stopped traffic, buildings dark. But there are also areas with visible activity. Groups of infected wandering, occasional vehicles moving rapidly, fires burning.
One shot shows a massive crowd of infected, hundreds of them gathered in what looks like Central Park, just standing there swaying. It's surreal and terrifying. The density of infection in that one location is staggering.
The news anchor is speculating about why they gather like that. Maybe they're drawn to open spaces, or maybe the virus causes some kind of collective behavior. Nobody knows. We're observing behaviors we don't understand in people who are no longer really people. The anchor just said something interesting. She pointed out that the infected don't seem to attack each other. They only target uninfected people. How do they distinguish? Is there something about the virus that makes carriers recognize each other? Or is it simpler that infected people don't trigger the aggressive response because they're not fleeing or showing fear? Understanding behavior patterns might help survival. If infected only attack moving targets or people showing fear, maybe staying completely still would allow you to avoid detection. Or maybe that's wishful thinking and they'd attack regardless. I wish we had more scientific data on how the infected behave, but studying them requires proximity, observation time, controlled conditions, none of which are available in the current chaos. We're just collecting anecdotal reports and trying to find patterns. It's 1 o'clock now, 7 hours into this broadcast. I'm settling into a rhythm. Monitor news feeds, share updates, provide guidance, acknowledge the human cost. Over and over, cycling through the same basic functions. The governor is giving another press conference. She looks worse than she did this morning. Exhausted, stressed, maybe a little defeated. She's providing updated numbers, though she acknowledges they're likely undercounted. Over 1,500 confirmed cases in the state. Dozens of hospitals compromised or evacuated. Unknown number of civilian casualties. Infrastructure beginning to strain in affected areas. Military deployment proceeding, but encountering resistance from people trying to flee. She's implementing additional restrictions. Martial law is now in full effect statewide. Shoot on-site orders for anyone infected or exhibiting symptoms outside of quarantine. Mandatory surrender of all firearms by civilians to prevent armed resistance to containment measures. That last one is going to be controversial and probably unenforceable. You're asking Americans to give up their guns during a crisis when they need self-defense capability the most. Compliance will be minimal, and attempting to confiscate weapons will just create additional conflict. I understand the logic. Armed civilians might resist quarantine enforcement or shoot at military personnel, but disarming the population also leaves them vulnerable to infected attackers and unable to defend their homes. There's no good answer. Every decision has downsides. We're just choosing which bad outcomes we're willing to accept. The governor is taking questions, and a reporter asks about evacuation plans for unaffected areas of the state. The governor says there are no plans to evacuate because there's nowhere to evacuate to. The virus is spreading across the region, and moving people would just spread it faster. So we're staying put, everyone in their homes or wherever they are, waiting to see if infection reaches them or if containment holds. Another reporter asking about food supplies. The governor says supply chains are being maintained by military logistics and distribution points will be established in each community. Nobody will starve as long as the state has resources.
As long as the state has resources, that's the qualifier.
We have food stored, supplies stockpiled, but it's not infinite. At some point, if this goes on long enough, we'll run out. And then what? I suppose we deal with that problem when we get to it. No point worrying about food shortages weeks from now when people are dying today. The press conference is ending. The governor's final statement is asking people to follow all official guidance, to trust in government response, and to help each other survive this crisis. She sounds sincere, but also like she's reading a script written for a different, more manageable emergency. I don't think anyone wrote a script for this. We're improvising based on pandemic plans that assumed a different kind of pathogen, assumed we'd have time to react, ability to treat, capacity to manage. None of those assumptions are holding.
My phone is buzzing with texts from friends and colleagues, people checking if I'm okay, asking what I'm hearing, sharing information from their areas. I'm trying to respond when I can, but I also need to focus on the broadcast.
One text from a friend who works in emergency management. He says the situation is worse than being reported publicly. Infection rates are higher, death toll is climbing faster, containment is failing in multiple locations. They're trying not to cause panic, but internal assessments are dire. I believe him. What we're seeing publicly is bad enough. If the private assessments are worse, we're in serious trouble. He's also saying there are discussions about abandoning certain areas entirely, places where infection is too widespread to contain, where attempting to maintain order is costing more lives than it saves. Pull back to defensible positions and let those areas burn out. That means condemning everyone in those abandoned zones, leaving them to die or fend for themselves with no support. It's triage on a geographic scale. Save who you can, accept losses you can't prevent. We can't report that on air because it's not confirmed and it would cause panic, but knowing it's being discussed changes my perspective. We might be in one of those areas deemed not worth saving. I'm looking out the window again. The street below is still empty except for occasional military vehicles. I can see smoke on the horizon, multiple fires burning. The city is dying, and I'm watching it happen in real time. There's movement down there, people running, 3 or 4 individuals sprinting down the street, pursued by maybe 10 infected. The runners are fast, but the infected are relentless. They're gaining.
I can't see how it ends.
The runners turn a corner and disappear from view, infected following. I hope they made it somewhere safe. I hope they had a plan beyond just running. That could be me if I leave this building. Running through streets full of infected, hoping to reach somewhere safe. Better to stay here as long as possible, as long as there's power and security holds. My producer is looking pale. She's been monitoring feeds and coordinating information, but I think the stress is getting to her. I told her she can leave if she wants, head home to her family. She's thinking about it. If she leaves, I'll be alone here, just me and the security guards downstairs. It's isolating, but maybe safer. Fewer people means fewer potential infection vectors. She's decided to stay for now. Says she wants to help, wants to do something useful. I understand that sitting at home waiting would be worse than being here working. It's 1:30, and I'm going to shift topics slightly. I want to talk about the psychological impact of what we're experiencing, the trauma of watching society collapse, of losing people, of facing potential death. This is going to affect everyone who survives post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, survivor's guilt. The mental health crisis that follows this will be enormous, assuming we survive long enough to have a afterwards. If you're feeling overwhelmed, that's normal. If you're scared, that's appropriate. If you're grieving, you have every right to grieve. Don't suppress those emotions. Feel them, process them, but don't let them paralyze you. Focus on what you can control. Your immediate environment, your actions, your preparations. You can't control the virus or government response or global situation, but you can control how you react, how you prepare, how you treat others. Find meaning where you can. Help someone if you're able. Document what's happening. Connect with loved ones. Small acts of humanity and purpose can sustain you when everything else feels hopeless. And if you're thinking about giving up, about ending things because it seems hopeless, please don't. We don't know how this ends yet. There might be treatment tomorrow. Containment might work. Survival is possible, but only if you stay alive long enough to see it. I know that's easier said than done. I'm sitting here in relative safety while others are fighting for their lives, but I'm also human, also scared, also wondering if I'll survive this. We're all in the same existential crisis together. The suicide hotline number again is 1-800-273-8255. If you're in crisis, call them, talk to someone. Don't face this alone. I'm seeing reports of people taking their own lives rather than face potential infection. I understand the impulse, control over your own death when everything else is out of control, but it's premature. We're still in the early stages. There's still hope. Hope is hard to maintain when the evidence points toward catastrophe. But humans are resilient. We've survived plagues before. Not everyone, but enough to continue. Enough to rebuild. That has to be the assumption we operate under. The news is showing more military deployments. Federal troops arriving to supplement National Guard, tanks, armored personnel carriers, heavy equipment. The scale of mobilization is incredible. The reporter is asking a general what the mission is. He's being vague. Support civilian authorities, maintain order, protect critical infrastructure. All standard language that doesn't reveal actual strategy. I think the mission is containment at all costs. Even if that means shooting civilians, letting areas burn, accepting mass casualties, the military's job is to prevent this from spreading further. Period. Individual lives are secondary to that strategic objective. It's brutal calculus, but probably necessary. If this spreads beyond the current quarantine zones, if it reaches the entire country, we lose everything. Better to sacrifice those already infected to save those still clean. I'm one of the potentially infected in the quarantine zone, exposed to risk, subject to that brutal calculus. If I were outside the zone, I'd probably support the containment strategy. Inside, it feels like abandonment. Perspective matters. Easy to support difficult decisions when you're not the one being sacrificed. It's 2 o'clock now, 8 hours of broadcasting. I'm going to need another break soon. Body needs rest even if mind is wired on adrenaline. The case numbers are completely useless at this point. We're past tracking individual cases into measuring overall infection rate in the population. Epidemiologists are estimating based on hospital admissions, death rates, and mathematical models. Current estimates suggest 5 to 10% of the metro area population might be infected. That's 400,000 to 800,000 people in less than 24 hours. The doubling time is accelerating as more infected means more potential transmission vectors. At this rate, the majority of the population will be infected within days, unless containment works, unless treatment emerges, unless something changes the trajectory. I'm trying to imagine what this city looks like in 3 days if current trends continue. Millions infected, millions dead, infrastructure collapse, survivors hiding wherever they can, the military trying to maintain control of a wasteland. It's apocalyptic, not metaphorically, literally the end of the world as we know it. The city might never recover. Even if we stop the virus eventually, the damage might be too severe to rebuild. Other cities are experiencing similar trajectories. Boston, Philadelphia, D.C., all reporting exponential growth. The entire East Coast corridor is becoming a plague zone. And internationally, it's spreading even faster in some places. Cities with higher density, less developed healthcare infrastructure, weaker government response. The death tolls are going to be staggering. China is reporting they've sealed off entire cities. Tens of millions of people in complete lockdown, military enforcing quarantine with lethal force. If anyone tries to leave, they're shot on sight. It's draconian, but might be the only effective response. European countries are implementing similar measures. Russia's response is opaque, but reports suggest they're being even more brutal than China. Anyone showing symptoms is being executed immediately to prevent spread. The moral questions are overwhelming. Is it justified to kill infected people to protect the uninfected? Is it murder or necessary public health intervention? Where's the line between reasonable precaution and atrocity? I don't have answers. I just know that people are dying in massive numbers, and governments are doing whatever they think necessary to stop it. The Philippines is reporting complete breakdown of government control in Manila. Infected overrunning the city, authorities fled, population on their own. If that pattern repeats in other places, we'll have major cities simply ceasing to function as organized entities. What happens to millions of people in a city without government, without services, without security? Chaos, violence, death, survivors forming groups, defending territory, competing for resources, reversion to something primitive and brutal. We're watching civilization collapse in real time, the structures we built over centuries coming apart in hours. It's sobering and terrifying. I need to take that break now. 10 minutes. I'll be right back. Stay with Tenor. I'm back. Splashed water on my face, tried to clear my head, and it's hard to maintain focus after so many hours of this, but I need to keep going. The building security just reported an incident. Infected people tried to enter the lobby. The guards engaged and had to shoot 2 of them. The bodies are in the street outside. So the infection is at our doorstep now. Not abstract threat in other neighborhoods, but right here. The guards are securing all entrances, barricading with whatever they can find. We're turning this building into a fortress.
How long can we hold if infected are actively trying to get in?
Security has weapons and ammunition, but not unlimited supplies. If we're besieged by dozens or hundreds of infected, eventually they'll either overwhelm defenses or we'll run out of ammo. I need to think about exit strategies. If this building becomes untenable, where do I go? Home to my family? Try to reach a military checkpoint? Find some other secure location?
No good options. The streets are full of infected. Travel means exposure. Staying means potential siege. Every choice carries enormous risk.
For now, staying put makes sense. We have supplies, defensible position, power, and communication. But I need to be ready to leave if circumstances change. My producer is setting up additional barricades in the stairwells. If infected, get into the building. We want to slow their access to upper floors. It's probably futile. They're relentless and strong, but any barrier helps. I'm alone in the studio now. She's downstairs helping with fortifications. It's quieter without her presence, more isolating. Just me and the microphone and the world ending outside. The afternoon light is strange. Smoky from all the fires, giving everything an orange tint. It's beautiful in an eerie way. Apocalypse has aesthetics, apparently. I'm getting philosophical, which probably means I'm more tired than I realize. Need to stay sharp, stay focused on practical matters. The news is reporting that communication infrastructure is beginning to fail in some areas. Cell towers going down, internet nodes offline, power outages spreading, the information network that connects